So a little quick self-discipline seeking and self-reflection that led you to say, this is what I need right now.
That was just it. You heard I just said it now. I was playing football and I wasn't going to class.
We kept hearing that, oh, it's paramilitary. And we get there, it's like, no, this isn't paramilitary.
Dropped those bags and started running, man, and we never turned back till we got back on the plane, man.
In the military, I guess you really don't have time to.
And to us, you know what it is? It's Tuesday.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So
exactly. You don't have to take a full-blown course, But
YouTube.
Welcome to your very first episode of You've Been Served, the show that dives deep into the service, heroes, hardships, and stories that you don't often hear. I am your host, Ken Corbin. Today's guest embodies the very soul of service. From the brutal deserts of Iraq, the fire-ravaged neighborhoods in St. Louis County, we'll get up and personal. He's been a calm in chaos, a leader when it mattered the most, a United States Marine Corps platoon sergeant, a former drill instructor, a firefighter, a paramedic, a captain, and now the man that they call Battalion Chief. He's commanded troops in war, shaped the next generation of fire recruits, stood toe-to-toe with politics, and mentored minorities on how to break barriers within the fire service. This isn't just a story about service. This is a story about transformation, discipline, leadership, and surviving systems that were never meant for you in the first place. Strap in, because in this episode of You've Been Served, we go deep, raw, and real. Rodney Bland, welcome to the show.
Hey, man, thank you for having me.
All right, so as they say, let's just get right to it. Let's
go.
Lock and load. Let's get after it.
Let's do it.
So let's go back to the start. When did you first decide to join the military? Was there a specific experience? Was there a reason? Or, what pushed you to enlist?
Oh, boy. So, I never intended on joining the military, to be honest with you. My father was in the Army.
Okay.
So we moved a lot, he moved a lot, and I was just like, that was never the life I wanted for myself. But, honestly, I'll be honest, it's probably a lack of discipline that got me into the military, because I was in college playing football, man, and that was just it. You heard, I just said it now. I was playing football and I wasn't going to class. So, I knew, my mom. So I was like, man, you know what? One thing I know that I cannot do is drop out of this school and go back home and sleep in that basement. I knew that was not an option.
Right.
So it literally, man, I joined the military. Honestly, it was so quick. When I got a letter and I talked to one of the coaches and he was like, man, it's not gonna work out. He said, I was about to go on academic suspension. And it was as fast. The thought was, like I said, just quick what I just gave you. And then I went to the military. To the commons in the cafeteria, and they had all the services out there.
So a little quick self-discipline seeking and self-reflection that led you to say, this is what I need right now.
That's what I have. It was no other options, honestly. So I went into the Marine Corps, man.
Well, good. We're glad that you did serve. So you served as a platoon sergeant in Iraq. And your leadership has been recognized throughout your basically entire career, not only as a soldier, but in St. Louis County Fire Service. I know that personally for a fact. So what was it like? How did that shape your experiences to become the leader that you are today?
As far as the military?
Yes.
Honestly, Ken, when I was a young guy, I was one of those fire truck chasers. I always thought it was cool, man. And, you seen the movies back, I'm dating ourselves, but like Backdraft and all those, man, it sounds corny, man, but I was like, man, I think I could do that. And, after I got to the military, I'm like, man, it still had the team concept, and, like we've spoken before, I thought it was like a paramilitary organization, and, it still had the camaraderie and everything, like, so really it had the same, encompassed the same pieces that I was used to.
Structure,
Exactly.
Discipline, but also teamwork and camaraderie.
1,000%.
I've never served in the military. So many of our listeners have not served in the military. So what was it really like on the ground? What are the emotional experiences and what stands out from time to time about your service in Kuwait and Iraq?
Honestly, it was a mix of emotions. I couldn't imagine myself handling it at 48 years old now, but at 21 years old, when it's kind of like us when with fire, if I can equate that. With fire, we train so hard for it. So when we get it, we ready to go. You want to jump in and get in it. So it was kind of the same feeling. You know what I mean? Of course, you had anxiety and fear, but at the same time, in my heart, I still feel that to this day. Marines were, we were the hardest thing they ever made. So when we hit the ground, man, like I told you about the jet lag. Hey, my sergeant major was like, "Hey, you guys want to get rid of this jet lag? Drop those bags
Let's go.
and let's go." So we
Right,
literally
right.
dropped those bags and started running, man. And we never turned back till we got back on the plane, man.
Yeah. I think the slight difference in the military, you were relatively young, and very rarely does a young person get that type of responsibility so early on because you led men even at an early age.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, there's a slight difference there. So, but congratulations and thank you for your service once
Appreciate
again. I know I keep saying that. Looking back at the wars that America's been involved in, and there are many, what are your thoughts about the political aspects? Was there ever a time to where you question, man, we're over here. Am I really getting the full story, or why are we here? Because it seems like we're always active in a lot of places globally.
I mean, honestly, you were trained not to even, unlike, the fire service, which is more obviously it's not as controlled as well, but it was, I don't think you could have made it through questioning the fact, why am I here? Why am I doing this? But I will say, when you actually met the people of that country, then you realize neither one of us asked for this. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because the people were kind, man. If you want to be honest, they paint, you paint the picture out to you going out here to do this and the enemy and all these people, and that's not the case. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, it's politicians pulling strings.
Exactly.
They didn't ask to be there, and I didn't either. So, but I had a job to do, and I did it.
And did it well. And it sounds like, and that was one of my questions too, is the response from people outside of the U.S. and how they feel about you being there. Of course, being in a foreign country brings about its own unique set of challenges. You're in a foreign country, you're in a foreign land, you're not familiar with the locals. A lot of times you don't speak the language. So, what did you learn about yourself in the midst of all this? And not only yourself, but even your soldiers. How did you guys navigate through that transition, not being at home?
Well, like I said, I was actually in a unit and we deployed a lot. So I said before we went to Kuwait, I did 6 months in Japan, and like I said, I visited Australia, and honestly, to this point, I've visited every continent except for Antarctica.
Wow.
And you don't appreciate it as much when you're young, but when you're older, man, it just gives you a wider view of the world. You know what I mean? So you see that how well we have it in the United States, because when you literally see people sleeping on dirt floors, and that gives a whole nother meaning to the word broke. I'm like, oh, I grew up broke. I didn't. By their
Right.
standards, I grew up
Right.
pretty well off.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when you travel globally and outside of your box or circle, it gives you a different perspective. Doesn't necessarily
Absolutely.
make the perspective wrong. It just makes it different.
Absolutely.
They do it different. Doesn't necessarily make it wrong. They just handle it. Their priorities and sometimes goals are different. So,
1,000%.
yeah, that's great. Speaking about that, as it pertains to conflicts, and like I said, we're involved in many, and it seems like now we're at a point in time to where there's just so much going on. Do you think that in the military service today there are going to be long-term consequences for the United States being involved in so many areas that
Man,
isn't
I'm
it?
prayerful about that because, I mean, the allies that we used to have, everything changes on a global, daily basis. And honestly, I pray that, we can, the cooler heads, prevail, and that we get through these conflicts, man, because it's looking pretty grim right now, to be
Yeah,
honest.
especially now, especially now. And I know a lot of people have a different perception because, like I said, they haven't served. So, what do you say to people who've never served, but they criticize our military and men like Rodney Bland, who went out to protect not only the country, but just safety?
Honestly, everybody is patriots, but, honestly, how can you be a patriot if you never served this country, So honestly, Ken, you know me, I'm not really one for the naysayers, man. You're gonna say what you're gonna say, and I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. And what you have to realize is most of these guys are kids, and they didn't ask to be there. You know, they have you get some orders, and next thing you know, you're on the first thing smoking. So guess what? You do what you know what you're supposed to do, and you try your best to make home to your family, man.
Yeah,
That was my
and a
mindset.
lot of times you're in survival mode.
Yeah, a
Yeah, they
thousand
don't
percent.
understand the dynamic of what you've been asked to do, and a lot of people don't appreciate it. But
Yeah, because
yeah,
fight or flight usually is a 15-second, your body's response. But fight or flight for 9 months or a year, can you imagine the toll that takes on you for that amount of time?
that's a long time. That's a lot of adrenaline. That's a lot of ups, downs, highs, and lows. Yeah. So after your time in the Marine Corps, you transitioned into the fire service. I remember early on when you started your career. But what was that transition like for you? And how did the military shape your experience in the way that you would approach the fire service? We spoke earlier that we kept hearing that, oh, it's paramilitary. And we get here, it's like, no, this isn't paramilitary. Can you
Absolutely.
talk about that?
Honestly, like I said, although I didn't see the military, as a young man as my future, I'm very thankful for it because I think that I gained a level of discipline that I would have never achieved anywhere else. So honestly, it was hard getting in. A lot of doors closed in your face, and I didn't know the politics of the fire service. I didn't know. I thought it was just like any other job that you just. So honestly, I mean, you probably laugh now you think about it, but I remember I put a suit on, man. I had a briefcase, and the academy gave us a list of all the addresses of all the departments in St. Louis County. And I literally, man, went and I'm like, oh, are you guys hiring? And, how do I apply? And then, it's kind of like, nah, that's not really how this works. But, fortunately, man, I'll be honest to you, one of my academy classmates told me about a program they had at one of the county departments that he was a part of. And, I mean, the rest was history, man.
I remember that when you first started, and I just saw you, and you can kind of tell those guys that kind of stand out. There's a different aura, a level of confidence about themselves, and they're just not all over the place. You seem focused, which you've always been as long as I've known you. Yeah, so that's great stuff. As a battalion chief, what are the challenges you face in the fire service that are different from your military experience?
I don't know necessarily I would say different but ultimately I think it really, it's for us from my perspective because obviously I look at things different. The fire department is in no shape or form the military, obviously, but you know, it's still the same staples. It's still the guys, the camaraderie, and working together to achieve a goal. And now, versus me kicking in doors and putting out fires, I'm more concerned about getting these guys home. And like I said, the fortunate thing about that was when I was in the military, that was my same mindset. I got to get these guys home.
Yeah, that was a
So
huge responsibility for you at such a early age. I think for me, when I thought of a drill sergeant, there was a bar, and every drill sergeant met this criteria. I mean, just literally badass. But in St. Louis County or in the fire service, it appears that there's a different level of variations in the level of training of, some officers in some departments. I'm sure that's not the case in all places. So
right,
that's what I meant, I guess, in terms of leadership and how it
right, yeah,
transitioned in
absolutely.
that. Yeah. What's it like to lead a diverse team of people? Obviously, overseas, when you're going to foreign countries, there's a diverse group of individuals, different race, different religions, a little bit of different everything. So when you're in St. Louis County, in a place that you often see discrimination and just, I guess, racial issues, how do you overcome that in the military? I guess you really don't have time to.
Well, in the military, man, it was more, early on, your DIs came and they was like, we have dark green Marines, we have light green Marines, but at the end of the day, we're all green and we all Marines, and we all came for one thing. And I still approach it like that, to be honest to you, man, because what I found in my journey to the fire service and throughout, I have people that look like me that haven't helped me, and I have people that look like me that have, and vice versa. Honestly, like the classmate I spoke of earlier, was a Caucasian guy, and one of my good friends to this day. But you know what? He was the one that lifted me up, man. And not only that, you know, I gained interest through the fire service with him. And when he moved on to another department, I was the first phone call that brought, and I came 6 months later. So, you know, man, I don't look at things as race. And people say that, you know, everybody says, "Oh, I don't see color." You see color. It's impossible not to.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, man, what I found is that, you know, you have buttholes, black ones, white ones. But at the end of the day, guess what? It's not a black butthole or white butthole. You just a butthole. You know what I mean?
Understood. Yeah. So, in your current role, and you're coming up on 20 years of service, you know, right now. We often hear the term burnout. It's like, man, I'm getting burned out, so on and so forth. You know, and sometimes it happens. And it's a challenge to keep morale high and just keep people focused. How do you do that as a battalion chief to keep your crew ready, prepared, but also just good morale and aggressively do the job to the best of their ability?
I mean, I try to challenge them every day, man, you know, and we approach things, man. With us, it's not half-assed, and pardon my French, but there's no middle ground with it. You know, whatever we do it 1,000%. We keep rolling, and you know what that means? Fun times too. You know, like I tell them, I say, you know what? You can have as much fun because nobody likes fun like me. But when those bells go off, you know what? When we put those boots on, man, it's a whole new ball game. You know, so and you know, I've been fortunate enough. I got a good set of captains, man. Great administration, and they support me, and you know, and how I approach things because quite, you know, obviously I'm different than everybody else there a little bit, but you know, I think they have, you know, over 20 years they'd have put me out by now if they hadn't embraced who I am. So, you know, I think they embraced the way I just attack things head on, man. I don't let it fester, man. And when I have a problem with something, I address it right then, right now, and we correct it, man. And like I said, I got a great group from top to bottom, man, and they kick butt every day, man.
Yeah, what I could see over your career, your reputation pretty much has always preceded you, and your body of work speaks for itself. And the organization that you work for has definitely always strived to just do great things, particularly as it pertains to customer service and community involvement.
Absolutely.
So, what advice do you have for young people, particularly African Americans and not just African Americans, that are looking at service? It could be service in the military, it could be service in the fire service, but what advice would you give to them as it pertains to seeking out those careers?
Just, man, life advice. You know, my son now is about to graduate from college, and he's about to face the real world now, you know. And, you know, I tell him the same thing as I tell him, man. You know, there's going to be a lot of doors closed in your face. But the thing about it is, are you going to fold up? No, you don't. You know, you go kick in the next one, you know. Right. And so I tell these, you know, we have a program that we started, you know, in my organization, and, you know, we're reaching out to underprivileged communities, and I just tell them, like, you know, you just got to keep going because that's what life is at the end of the day, man. You know, it's bigger than the fire service. It's bigger than the military. You know, if I stopped every time somebody said, no, Rodney, we're not doing that, or, well, sorry, Mr. Bland, it's not going to work, you know, man, where would I be? So my advice to them is, no matter what, who tells you that you can't, man, you take that with a grain of salt, you keep moving, and you don't just open the door, you kick in the damn door. You know what I mean?
Right. But also, I think one of the other dynamics we have to look at is there is a diverse group of people that we work with. There's also a diverse group of people that we serve. So you have to keep an open mind about 100%. Their thoughts, their beliefs, and how they approach things. And we don't always get ideal circumstances. So I think that's great advice, not only you know to your son, but the individuals that are looking to enter service in general, because anytime you're in service, it could be the restaurant industry, it could be a cruise ship, you're going to meet a different clientele on a regular basis. And I've served, you know, with you in some instances, and we hear terms like, oh, marginalized, these people are marginalized. Well, they're only marginalized or underserved because we don't serve them. We don't put forth an effort, you know, and they might just be economically challenged, but certainly they're not invisible. Do you feel that same way sometimes? Is that your experience?
They're not invisible to us.
Exactly.
You know what I
They're
mean?
never invisible to us because we're the ones that actually get the phone calls when the bell
And we
rings.
were them at one point. You know what I'm
Exactly.
saying? So,
Exactly.
the thing I've gained over the years, man, is empathy and compassion. Because what and we forget because when people meet us, and this sounds so jargon wise, but when people meet us, it's literally their worst day ever.
It is.
When you
It
call
is.
911, you don't call 911 because you're having a great time. You know what I mean? And to us, you know what it is? It's Tuesday.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
I have to keep that in perspective and like, you know what? It's Tuesday for me, but this person just lost their home or they're sick. Even the sick,
Or they're trapped in a vehicle and they don't
anything,
know if they're going to survive. These are the things
anything.
that are playing through their head. And a lot of times, what may seem as a minor call, it may not be an emergency,
To us,
to us, but
yes,
it is an emergency to them. But we don't get to distinguish between that. When the bell rings,
1,000%, man.
and one of the things I've always respected about you, and I always say this, we do the job to the best of our ability. Will we make mistakes sometimes? Yeah. Could things go better? But that's why we go back and have after action. We have critiques, because our
1,000%.
goal is to always get better,
Yeah.
and we have to learn from those mistakes. And I know that's how you approach things with your crew. I know that's how you approach things, as a department. So that's great. Great to hear that. So looking at the future, what do you think the future landscape of St. Louis County, not only St. Louis County Fire Service, but the fire service in general, but also the military? And how can we better support the men and women who put on those uniforms? It could be military, it could be fire department, who put on those uniforms to serve. What can we do to better show our appreciation for service? Because service is a tough job.
Oh, absolutely. Honestly, I feel that after 9/11, the post, as far as the military was concerned, changed because like during Vietnam, when the soldiers returned, you seen the welcome they got, and they experienced horrific war conditions and things like that. But I think after the first Gulf War and things like that, it's the military was looked at in a different perspective. You know what I mean? And I think solely because that was one of the first times, aside from Pearl Harbor, that America was attacked directly. So I feel that the U.S. population was like, hey, they went to bat for me, so it felt personal at that point. Vietnam didn't feel personal to them. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right,
The Gulf War, that felt personal.
right,
So
right.
it's the thank
I,
you. As a fireman, thank you for your service, and you hear that.
You hear that a lot, and I guess for me, and I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. You could be in the grocery store, you could be buying a sandwich, and a person will come up and says, I've got his lunch, I've got his
Absolutely,
dinner, or let me take care of that.
absolutely, man.
So it sounds like most of the time, given your military experience, people were glad that you went to bat and served this country.
1,000%.
Yeah, I think as firefighters, we often take for granted the level of gratitude that we get because we're always the good guys. We're saving lives, we're not taking them.
I don't, man. I'm
But
always grateful.
yeah, but when you go to other countries and you're asked to do things and you have to survive, they don't always agree with it, but also they don't understand the circumstances.
Oh yeah,
You know,
yeah,
because when you're in a foreign land, you're not there to harm anybody. You're just trying to keep and maintain peace. But when it comes towards you, and it could be from anybody, it could be old, young, and like you said, you're in survival mode, and your job is just like we say in the military. Everybody goes home.
that's
That
it,
is,
man.
yeah,
At the end of the day, that's the ultimate goal. I'm not there to kill or pillage, man. I'm there to come, to leave with the same 100 guys I came with
and be safe.
and be
Yeah,
safe,
be
man.
safe and go home. Great, great, good to hear that. So, what was your most important lesson that you learned from your time in Iraq that has stuck with you, during your leadership today? I'm sure there's something, as firefighters, we got that call that, man, just nags us, and we
Yeah,
see it, we still hear it. I mean, everything. It's almost like we're reliving it. So,
absolutely, man. Honestly, man, you know, when you get off day one, of your deployment or, hour one of a 48-hour shift at the firehouse, you kind of, I think that, and I tell my son this, man, I say, hey, how do you climb Mount Everest? One
one
day ain't gonna
step at
step
it.
at a time.
Absolutely.
So, where there is a room for big picture, you got to focus on right now, man, because the right now is what gets you to the next day, and it just keeps going, and you accumulate these things, and eventually, man, you get through it. So, I mean, I guess, and I'm still working on it, but patience, man. I just, because me, sometimes I want it right now. I want to get this done. This that. There's a thing to be said for patience, and just let's see how this thing plays out, And I can say that as far as our government in the times we're in right now. We gotta have patience, man. Just see how some of these things play out.
Patience, but also tolerance,
Patience
because I
and
don't have to agree with you, and your perspective is exactly what it is. It's your perspective.
100%.
Doesn't mean that it's wrong, but it's not something that we shouldn't be able to respect each other's opinion. We often hear the term, well, I'll just agree to disagree, but I'm steady trying to change your way of life, change how you view things. And typically that's not going to happen because I don't have the experiences, I think
1,000%.
this whole thing is frame of reference based. And I would tell people all the time, I said, here's my frame of reference. And you serving in the military and in the area that you serve in as a battalion chief, you have a different frame of reference, and it's valuable because a lot of times people don't know what they don't know. Do you find that accurate as well?
1,000% can. I mean, like you said, man, and that's, I think that's a great point is, try to look at things from, outside of your lens, because, and it's hard, but at the same time, I think when you look at things from a different perspective or from what I call an eagle's eye view, man, you just look down on the entire situation, not just from where Rodney's standing or where Ken's sitting, but look at the entire situation. And I think when you approach things like that, man, then you get a greater respect for other people's opinions and their thoughts. And, just like Iraq, and we talking about the Middle East, this culture is thousands of years older than America, so I don't think that we can go change their culture or their way of doing things.
And who are we to dictate?
And who are we to do that?
Because if that's working for you,
And it's worked for a while,
Exactly. And sometimes if we actually take a look at these things, we could actually learn valuable lessons. I had a friend tell me that in his travelings from the U.S. to other countries, he almost felt like, let me go over here to this third world country and show him how we do things over here. And he'd get there and he's like, oh crap, you actually do that better than we do. Maybe there's something to be learned from here. So have you ever seen that experience of where you get there?
Yeah, and one thing about, when traveling, and I think it's just sometimes, our I'm trying to put this like, so our American way of doing things, we go to different countries and we think that we're going to, expose ourselves to
Or save them.
Yeah, it's not gonna happen. That's why I think, and if you when you travel, when you try to just small things like trying to learn the language, even if it's just small phrases, that goes a long way to people.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Because that means like, okay,
You're making an effort.
Yeah, it's not like you don't speak English. Well, it's not America. Of course they don't speak English. So, I think that goes a long way to who you are as a person, and people embrace that.
They do. They certainly appreciate the effort. There's an old phrase that says, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So when I travel to a different country, I do exactly what you said. I try and learn a portion of the language, speak the language, and also communicate with them, in their language whenever possible. I mean, you don't have to take a full-blown course, but
YouTube.
I know, and social media certainly gives you an opportunity to navigate through the basics.
No, man, I couldn't agree more. Like I said, we probably butcher it, but you can see the appreciation. They smile
just because you made the effort. Just because,
it.
and a lot of times, if you show that you're at least trying, they'll give you certain recommendations.
Absolutely.
And try. Very receptive. So, if there's one thing that you could change about how people view the military and fire service, what would that be?
I think in the fire service, man, we're honestly in a good place. Like you said, we don't come on, a lot under the rhetoric, of other services, but because like you said, when we come in, it's usually in a, it's not a hostile capacity. You know what I mean?
Right.
But as far as the military, sometimes I think the takeaway with that would be, man, is that again, you have to realize that these young men and women are doing what they're told.
Yeah.
Nobody decided to go over to these places and do any of that. So you have to embrace that, man, that these guys are doing exactly what they're told to the best of their abilities.
Couple different dynamics, because you mentioned compassion as one of the key things that you need in the fire service. I tend to often think that, if you're coming into the fire service, it's a little different because you have to have compassion. That's key. Talent without compassion, you can be the best paramedic, you could be the best firefighter in the world, but if you don't understand what this person is going through, you're not going to be able to deliver that top-notch service that we seek. And had a instructor back in the day. He says, if I can teach the hands what to do as long as your heart is in it. You don't have to be the best soldier. You don't have to be the best firefighter. But if your heart is in it and your head is in it, I can always teach the hands.
Oh, 100%.
And that's a level of commitment I know I looked for in the individuals that I was in charge of training, developing, and I think that's certainly a good tool to have.
I mean, in the Bible, Ken, it said faith without works is dead. So I think the fire service is the same exact thing, man. Because if you don't have a heart to serve and you genuinely care and love others, you're in the wrong line of work and you will burn out.
Yeah, and it'll show itself also in your service. Someone will see you on that call not giving 100%, and that's what we're there for. We're there to give 110%. All day, every day. If we put 24/7, 365 on the truck, we have to follow that commitment and mean that. So when you're faced with difficult decisions, what core values do you think that guide in making that choice? Being an extra Marine, they talk about core values. I'm sure you've brought some of those core values with you in the fire service.
Man, I brought them all. It's on my back right now. I put a tattoo on there just so I can remind myself.
Remind yourself.
But, the Marine Corps core values are honor, courage, and commitment. And the Marine Corps motto is Semper Fidelis, always faithful. So when you combine those four things, man, I mean, I think that encompasses everything that you need to do, anything in this world. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And if you do that, it changes you as a person. You can write those phrases, you can put them on your back, you can put them on paper, but once you embrace those, it changes you as an individual. And I think people have to recognize that. And you could almost tell. We often say sometimes in St. Louis County and in the neighborhood, see, it's just on you. It's not in you. Yep. But certainly you're an individual that obviously you believe in it, not just wrote it on your body because it shows you live it. So what's the one quality you think that every leader should have, regardless of environment, regardless of what type of service you're in? If you're called to lead people, what's the one quality you think that every leader should have in his toolbox?
There are several, but I think the most, and this doesn't apply to the fire service, but I'm sure you've seen it in any line of work, man. You know what? Be the same person that you want them to be. Don't just say it. Don't what the kids say, don't just be about it. You know what I mean? Don't just talk about it, be about it. So, I think, man, that you have to be, you can't just tell them one thing and you're doing something else. Right. You have to be that model 24/7, man.
You have to lead by example.
You have to.
You also have to be consistent. I know one of the things that when I would make a decision that people didn't agree with, they would say, well, you have to be fair. And you tell them, hey, fair is what comes to a little small town in the country in the summertime. I'm consistent. Yep. We often say, take the name, take the face off, take the color off of it. Yep. Would I make that same decision, for every person that falls in this category regardless?
1,000%.
Yeah, I think consistency is a key, and also be a communicator. The military does a great job of training people and letting you know what the expectation is. I think from my personal experience, we have to do a better job of that in St. Louis County Fire Service. We have to do a better job at identifying and developing in those individuals. Yes. And let's just be honest and clear. Every person that goes through the academy or gets a paramedic license doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be, that individual that we're looking for. It's almost like a brand, Do you agree? At your department right now, I know you guys are very selective. We have to be a lot more selective, because we're stewards of the public trust, not only their finances, and they trust us. And the same thing in the military. There's a level of trust. That's why they call it trustworthy. That, and in order to put on that uniform, and I know the Marines take that very seriously. You will not wear this uniform unless, you understand these core values.
And I think that goes to the heads of the organizations that, first you have to figure out who are we. I think that's key. Who
Yeah.
are we?
Yeah.
And
Why are
that
we here?
sounds vague, but it really means, what do we represent, and what do we want, this organization to represent. So I think that, our organization has really done a great job of identifying that. And like you said, man, it's some guy, some people you see like that's us. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's one of ours. You can see that
Right.
right out the gate, and you can pick the department like I can see this guy going to X, Y,
Right.
Z. You know what I
Right.
mean? So I think, like you said, branding, man, is a great synopsis of in short term of what you want to achieve. What are we doing here?
Right.
What do we represent? So
Right. So looking back, was there a moment that actually changed your perspective of the fire service? So let me give you an example. When I entered the fire service, there were officers that I was like, wow, I'm going to be that guy. If I ever get promoted to captain, I'm going to be that guy. But there were also individuals who I was like, I don't know what I'm going to be, but I'm not going to be that guy. Did you see the same thing? And how did?
God, you know what, man? I honestly, and I was talking to my mom about it. I feel like that I was born in like I mean, obviously, I'm just my opinion, but in the most dynamic time in the world in the fire service, and like in 20 years, I've seen so much change, man. And I mean, got to see the first African American president. You know what I mean? And the fire service, when I came in, is so uniquely different. So, like you said, the guys that, when you came in when I was 24 years old, and I had a captain in particular, man, and he was a wild child, man. And I just looked up to this guy, man, and I'll never forget, if we have time, I can tell just quickly, man. We had a call, man, and it was a kid in the car, and he went, no turnout gear, man. He had, the jacket was open like mine now, no mask. And he opened his door, and I'm like, oh shit, pardon my friend. I'm like, I'm like, this is everything I thought the fire department was. And like I said, my first job, man, and we would, we pulling, selling, man. We thought we were studs. We had tank tops on, Ken. We didn't even have turnout gear on, And I'm like, man, this is everything. But, fast forward, man, with the exception of one of those, all of those guys are dead.
Right.
And they died from cancer. So, that's not coincidental.
No.
When you know better, you do better. So,
absolutely.
Like I said, wow, that was, at the time, I thought that was just the most amazing thing. I'm the opposite of that, as a leader now. So I'm like, hey,
put your gear
where's
on.
that
Put
mask?
your mask on.
What we doing?
So
yeah. But
yeah.
It's just so funny how I went from like, oh man, that was amazing. I mean, Kenny, I'm like, oh my God, this is backdraft in real life.
We worked in similar areas and demographics, and we were busy, and I think your ability as a firefighter was measured by how much heat and smoke was on that actual helmet, if your gear was dirty, not knowing that if the gear was dirty, the carcinogens were rubbing in our skin. So now, as you said before, if you know better, you're supposed to do better. And I think the one thing that the fire service has done nationwide is educate them as to the proper way to take.
Man.
Yeah, because the average life expectancy of a firefighter at one time was only to live 5 years after retirement because of the hazards that we're exposed to.
100%.
The dynamics of the chemicals have changed. It's no longer just ordinary wood and cribbing. It's polystyrenes, it's hydrocarbons, it's fluorocarbons, and all those other things. Technical terms that we weren't aware of right then, and it's constantly changing.
If you cleaned your helmet, man, if somebody cleaned your
helmet, you had a fight on your hands. You'd walk in and have to break up a fight. It's like, what happened? What happened? Did he say something about your mama? No, he cleaned my helmet. I mean, that was worse. That's the worst thing you could do.
Worst thing ever, man.
That you could clean somebody's helmet. So, yeah.
And along those lines, honestly, Kenny, I think another big thing that the fire service has shifted on that I really think that was long overdue was the approach to mental health, man.
Absolutely.
Because before, no way when I first started, because you come back and like, that really bothered me. You're like,
right.
You serious?
Right.
Right. But,
absolutely.
We one of the highest suicide rates, man, that I've experienced it personally, and I think that that focus is one of the, next to the cancer initiative, is one of the just single greatest things that we've gone, because now, we move so far on, man, that when we get back, we come back to the engine houses, and I call my captain and say, check on your guys, man,
Right, right.
because before you would just bury it deep, bury it deep, bury it deep. But guess what, man? You stuff that bag, it's going to explode.
Right. So on that note, do you think as a nation or a country, I know we're addressing that a little differently now as a profession in the fire service, but I think nationally we have to do a better job, and we see things in mental health and on levels that we don't always see it in other countries.
Oh, yeah.
So that kind of lets me know, we're the first world country. What are we doing wrong? I think we have to have better access to mental health.
Yes.
I think we have to let people know that it's okay not to be okay.
Absolutely.
And if you need help, ask for it. And I think in the fire service, we had a hard time doing that. We had a class way back in the day, and it was a training exercise, and it compared fighter pilots to firefighters. And it's like, why didn't you ask for help when you fell through the floor? It's like, I don't know. When we identify that, and we have to do a better job of taking care of each other. If we can protect if we're being asked to protect, and we take that much pride in taking care of the community, we have to keep an eye on each other. But mental health is certainly one of the things that, as a nation, we have to do a better job of.
Yeah,
Don't
because
you
along
agree?
those lines, I know we spoke about, like, in the military. So, really quickly, they're like, why is the suicide rate so high, now versus in World War II or Vietnam and all these other places? And what they discovered was that in World War II, how long did it take you to get back home? You took a boat, and it probably took you maybe 3 to 4 months to get home. In Iraq,
Right.
guess what? I left Tuesday and I was back home Thursday.
Yeah, yeah. So you also have a little time to decompress
Decompress, man.
and talk through those tough times in relationships
1,000%.
with like-minded people who experience the same thing.
100%.
On that note, I was asked, as a chief officer, why were we not accessing the mental health resources as often as possible? And one of the things that was revealed was a lot of the people who were doing the mental health, they weren't equipped to deal with trauma. Obviously, and I'll say this, trauma is trauma. There's no such thing as my trauma is more traumatic than your trauma, and we have to approach it in the same way. But some of the people that were, and I don't want to call them high school guidance counselors, they were not prepared to deal with the type of trauma that you see on a regular basis, particularly in a marginalized area, to where we do get to see a lot more drug overdoses. We are running, at first it was crack cocaine, and now it's methamphetamines and some of the other things. Fentanyl, again. But it's different, and it's constantly changing. And in the area that you serve in, it's a little more, I call it the working corridor, because you have to face some challenges that they don't necessarily face in other areas that are better off economically.
Mm-hmm.
Their fire departments are better funded. Their police departments are better funded. And I don't think it really should be really based on economic. I think poor people deserve fire protection, medical care, just as people without the resources. We have to do a better job.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more, man. And like you said, man, I think that I just ultimately, in a perfect world, obviously, we all gonna be doing the same, create the sameness. But you as an individual, man, that's when it comes. You just have to take that extra effort sometime, because like my mom said, kindness doesn't cost anything, man. We talking about funding and this, that, and another. Your heart and your kindness and how you treat people, that doesn't cost a thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we can get better with funding, absolutely, but it's the individuals, and that's why, I'm a proponent of people, when you serve in your own community, especially, then you have a different approach to things. But if you're not serving in your community, at the end of the day, we are all, in this job to do the right thing, bro.
Right. I think one of the things that, and I can remember early on as an interview question is like, why do you want to be a fireman? What's the common answer you hear when they ask you, why do you want to be a firefighter?
Why we want to be a firefighter? To save people and,
I want to help people.
That's to save people, help, yeah.
So I would flip the script in the interview and I would ask them, so when's the last time you did any customer service or community service volunteer? And if they couldn't identify something right away, what I was really asking was, when was it not about you?
Or money.
Because we talk, or money. Because if you're not serving now, why do I think you're going to do the job to the best of your ability if I pay you? But if you're volunteering at a church, you're volunteering at a shelter, or a women's home, or you're serving food, that shows that you're already serving for free. So I know what will happen if you're being compensated for it. So you got any parting words, anything you want to leave us with, or is anything that we should know, any question that I didn't ask that you would just like to elaborate on? Or
Honestly, man, I honestly feel like, along the guidelines, and you said that, your platform is service. And in this job, man, you can do it for the money, and we know people that do. But if you approach this job and you don't have a genuine care for people, man, just compassion, and you literally want to help people, do something else, man. It's something else. It's something else there for you.
right.
But
right.
and the thing about it, and you won't last, man, because we all live with these ghosts. And what are the ghosts? Because you know what a ghost is, Kenny. When you drive past the street and you say, "Hey, I remember when those kids happened in that house right there. Or remember when this car went off the road and they died right there."
Right.
So you live with these ghosts, man. But it's when you may run 50 just terrible calls, but it's that one, man.
That one. It's that one.
It's that one, and it's also that one where you like, man, this is why I do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I've had that. I've honestly been on the truck, man. And he's just riding back, and you're like, you know what, man? And me, whoever you praise, I praise God, and I just like, God, I just thank you for, let me be able to do this, man. And I'm grateful because I've impacted this life, and I know that, not with what I've done personally, but with us, our intervention, that we've impacted this life, man, and that may not even have gone any further than today. And I'm thankful for that, honestly, man.
Yeah. I think gratitude, certainly we have an opportunity to see things that people don't ordinarily get to see, when we're servicing the community. And a lot of times it is a bad time. So, and also humility. It's humbling because, like you said, a lot of times, and not just me as an individual, people in our country in general, I want it now. But traveling abroad and seeing other people, it's like, wow, I don't necessarily have to have that because I have a lot more than this person does. And They also seem a lot happier, and they're grateful.
They are happy.
Yeah.
They don't, it's not about materials with them, man. They're just happy, man. They're happy to be around. And so, and I said, we try to normalize this job. There is nothing normal
about what we do.
What we see is not normal, and nothing about this is normal.
Right.
And once when get to the point when you realize that, man, then I think that, and when it's okay to say, hey, like I said, I'm not okay.
I'm not okay. Because if you see this as normal, I think you're becoming desensitized to.
Yeah. Suicide hit my family, man, last summer, man. And it's one of those things, man, it just is
devastating.
Because you have no answers,
Yeah. Sorry for your loss, on that note, but also.
So, like I said, man, we love on each other, man. And when you get to that point where you're like, you know what? I'm not, certain things that used to make me happy don't make me happy anymore. And I'm just, don't normalize it. Don't just go, that if that's my leaving, my parting words with, it's okay not to be okay, and it's even more okay to get help. So
definitely have to get help. And it's certainly a privilege and an honor to have served with you. We talked about this earlier. There's one race, it's called the human race, and we have to do a better job of looking out for each other, taking care of each other. And I think we'll go a long way internally as a country, as a nation, but certainly worldwide. So, Rodney, man, it's been an honor, pleasure to have you here today. Your story is inspiring, certainly to other people, anybody who's watching. And a lot of people may not know about your history or your background, and they're a little bit more informed now. But no matter what uniform you wear, it could be the food hospitality, it's still service. And I think we have to think, even though we're spending our money, that those people are working hard, they're making an effort of service. And you have to have compassion, and you have to really love what you do. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for sharing your story, your wisdom, and to all our listeners. This is the first conversation that We've had our pilot episode, Rodney Bland. Stay tuned for more powerful and insightful episodes of You've Been Served, Global Edition. Until next time.